I am Delmer Markus, a son of Ed Markus, and this is a history of the Jacob and Susie Ernest Markus family, which would be my grandparents. It was 100 years ago, in 1892, that Jacob received the homestead certificate awarding him 160 acres of land in the southeast quarter of Section 9 in Township 100, north of Range 65, west of the 5th Principal Meridian in Douglas County, South Dakota, which many of you know as the Markus Homestead, located 4 miles north of Harrison. Here is the original patent that was issued to Jacob Markus from the United States government for that quarter section of land. Here are some pictures that we have when Susie was a young lady. Next, we have a picture when Jacob was a young man. Then we have a picture of them together. This was taken later in life. We are not sure of the date. And then we have a more recent picture of Jacob himself taken in the early 1930s. We have researched dates and interesting aspects of Jacob and Susie's ancestors, as well as their own lives and their children's lives. Later on this tape, we have included pictures and memorabilia from their lives, the homestead today, as well as the 1992 family reunion. Many of the original documents regarding the land and Jacob and Susie's life are on the Markus homestead that is presently being farmed by myself, my wife Beth, and our family. Betty Dalrup, a daughter of William and Catherine Markus and a granddaughter of Jacob and Susie, has done extensive research on the ancestors of Jacob Markus and Susie Ernest.
Okay, my name is Orville Markus. I'm the older son of Richard Ernest Markus. On the 11th of October, 1821, at 3 a.m., a baby boy was born in Utrecht, Netherlands, to Johannes Jacoba Gentenaar, age 21, who lived on Zand Street. At 11:30 a.m. the same day, the father of the child, Johannes Markus, came to the civil register and declared that this child was indeed his child, and that he is giving him the name of Johannes Hendrikus, and that he does indeed intend to marry Johanna as soon as he receives permission. Johannes Markus, age 31, was at the time a fusilier in the 3rd Battalion, 5th Division of the National Infantry. He was born in Utrecht and living on the Ridderskap Strait. Johannes declared that he was not able to write, so he brought 2 witnesses to sign for him. On November 21, 1821, at 12:30 p.m., in a civil ceremony before the mayor of Utrecht, Johannes H. Markus and Johanna J. Gentenaar were united in marriage. The groom declared that both his parents, Jan Hendrik Markus and Cornelia van Baron, were deceased. Therefore, his commanding officer gave permission for him to marry. The bride's father, Christianus Gentenaar, declared that he and his wife, Anna Niedenmeyer, give verbal consent for this marriage. The marriage certificate was signed by the bride, her father, and 2 witnesses for the groom. The bride and the groom then both declared Johannes Hendrikus had been born to them, and that he be recognized as Johannes Hendrikus Markus. That baby was our great-grandfather, who later came to America. As far back as we have gone into the records, the name is still John Henry Markus. Daughters Christina, born April 8, 1824, and Johanna, July 7, 1828, were sisters of great-grandpa Johannes. One of the girls married one named Decker and came to America. En route to Pella, they found work in St. Louis with the Peterbilt shoes. In the 1840s, large groups of Netherlanders immigrated to America. The National Reformed Church of Holland was controlled by the state. The state paid all church costs and salaries, and therefore demanded the clergy preach only what the state required. By the mid-40s, the simplest faith became so bigoted and controlled that clergy no longer could preach from the Bible, and were persecuted and jailed if they did. Both the Markus and the Ernest, great-grandparents, were among the immigrants. Great-great-grandparents, Peter and Susanna, Klikmanoy, Ernest, and 11 of their 12 children came. Great-great-grandfather, Reverend Peter Zoni, with wife Adriana, and 6 children came. He was the last of the succeeders to be jailed for preaching the gospel. They came to Sheboygan, Wisconsin area.
I'm Marlene Marcus Plooster, daughter of Jacob Marcus, Jr. Great-grandfather Johannes Marcus came to Pella, Iowa. In the book, Strangers in a Strange Land by Leonore Keebles Schulte, she tells the story of these colonists and her father-in-law, Reverend Hendrik Schulte, leader of the seceders. Leaving the final arrangements for immigration to the Secretary of the Colony, Isaac Overkamp, Schulte and his family departed on a faster and larger ship so he could make provisions for their transportation and housing in America. The colonists were busy loading boxes, trunks, and provisions on the 4 sailing boats that were anchored in the harbor. David Marcus, son of Dennis, and a great-grandson of Jacob Sr., has the trunk that contained all his great-great-grandfather's possessions. This trunk was loaded on the boat Nagasaki. Johannes probably constructed the trunk himself and built a secret compartment in it for his guilders, money, and whatever he had not trusted to the banker, Reverend Schulte. Think of the slow sailing boats of that day, going only as fast as the capricious wind and water chose to carry them. The 4 boats were the Maelstrom, the Peter Flores, the Katharina Jackson, and the Nagasaki. Johannes Marcus, age 26, was on the Nagasaki. At least one of his sisters, who was married to a Decker, was on the boat too. 2 leaders had been selected for each boat. They were to supervise, lead in prayer and song, and preach. Family ties were broken. It was only with great strength born of God that helped those trusting people to say farewell to home and country and get on those frail sailing boats. It was a bright, cold morning on April 11, 1847, when the first boat, and the one Great-Grandpa Marcus was on, put out to sea. The people sang psalms loud and long for courage. They were no more than out of sight of land when the women began cleaning the boat. They scrubbed the floors, washed the windows. Never were boats so clean. So impressed were the sailors with these clean and religious people, they often came in to hear them pray and to attend their worship. Think for a moment what their provisions were. They had no milk or fruit, only a portion of salt meat, hardtack, potatoes, and rice. This was all they had for 6 long weeks. They ate hardtack with coffee 3 times a day, but still they lived and thrived. Think of the storms they encountered. Life and death were with them. Some babies were born and some died, but their courage never failed. Freedom and homes of their own were before them. When the boats arrived in Baltimore, Schulte and his family were at the docks to welcome the colonists. For 5 days they were detained in the harbor for inspection, much to the disgust of the captain of one boat, who said, "No need to examine these people, for all they have done all the way over is pray and scrub. They had no time to be sick." But in spite of the protests, it was 5 days before they could land.
After 6 days, wait a minute, I gotta introduce myself. I'm Milford Markus, the oldest son of Jacob Markus, Jr. After 6 days, they began the westward trek. The railroads were slow and inadequate. They went north to Columbia, Pennsylvania. They transferred to canal boats and went on up to the rivers to Hollidaysburg, Pennsylvania. This method of transportation was the hardest of all to endure. The boats were small and very dirty, and they were so crowded that there was no room for people to lie down to sleep, and no meals were served on the boat. And when the boats would stop at small towns, they would get out and try to buy food or lie on the grass for a few moments' sleep, only to be called back to their crowded misery when the whistle blew. For 2 weeks they had to endure this. They transferred again to the train to cross a mountain range. The coaches were drawn up the mountains by means of stationary engines, and as most of the people had never seen mountains, they were uneasy when ascending, and equally so when they had to descend the same way. When the colony reached the Ohio River, conditions became much better. As this was a national waterway, they were able to secure larger, cleaner, and better boats. They could now enjoy the remainder of their journey on up the Mississippi to St. Louis. Here new joys and troubles awaited them. Their coming had been heralded in the newspaper, saying the Hollanders were in possession of great wealth. The mayor of St. Louis and others came to meet the colony, extending them the welcome of the city and presenting the key to a large building that had been prepared for their use. And while they were there, barracks also had been built for them. The news that the coloners possessed great wealth, all in gold, was greatly to the colony's disadvantage, for prices were raised. When Domine Schulte was in Washington, D.C., he inquired about Iowa land and had obtained an option to buy 18,000 acres of land at $1.25 an acre. And as soon as the colony was safely housed in St. Louis, a committee was sent to investigate Iowa. They found land, set up a post, and named it Pella. Returning to St. Louis, they prepared the colony for the long trek up the Mississippi by boat to Keokuk, Iowa. There they began buying their own conveyance for the last miles of their journey. Some bought one horse and a cart, while the family walked besides, and some bought ox team and wagons.
I'm Nona Markus, daughter of Jacob Jr. One bachelor bought a wheelbarrow in which he placed an odd box. A strong wagon with a team of oxen was purchased to carry the iron chest that contained all the gelders. This chest was guarded by 2 men during the day and 2 at night for fear of thieves. Some bought horses and wagons or carriages to carry the beautiful chests. Those who had plenty of money hired 2 seated carriages for their family. The coach in which Domine Schulte and family rode led the way. The rains had made the trees so green, the sky so blue, and the roads so muddy. Day after day they plodded on. The men were dressed in heavy woolen trousers, all woolen and velvet vests. The women wore full skirts over many petticoats of heavy linen. All the women had white caps. Some had a gold cap under lace, while others wore large, spreading caps well starched. Even the little girls were in long dresses like their mothers, all patiently trudging along to a land of plenty and freedom of religion. It was not an easy trip. There were no bridges over the many streams they had to cross. They often had to go down steep banks, through the water, up again over ruts and stones. Now and then they passed a cabin or small village. At night, some slept on the grass under the wagons and carts. Near the end of the 5th day, we came to a little log cabin. Near it on a hickory pole was a board on which was written, Pella. Many people had heard of the Hollanders coming to build a town, so a sawmill had been erected 3 miles away and lumber was available. A lot of it was walnut. Those who couldn't afford lumber built sod houses over a cellar. They were so intent on their religious freedom that they read the Bible at every meal and offered prayers of thanksgiving. It's good to see many of you still continue this practice. One often hears the saying, "The Lord tempers the wind to the shorn lamb." It seems so in this case, for the winter of 1847 was warm and mild. The next year, 5 August 1848, Johannes Hendrikus Markus and Adriana Bullard, an orphan girl raised by the Henry Barendrecht family, were married by Reverend Schulte.
I'm Dennis Markus, son of Jacob Markus, Jr. In May of 1849, a son was born, but lived only 3 months. Their second child was a girl, Marie, born June 22nd of June in 1850. She later became Mrs. Henry Dunbeston, and they had 10 children. Another daughter, Johanna, was born December 9 of 1851. She married George Balsma, and 7 children were born. Finally, a son, Johannes Henry, born on March 25 of 1854. At age 41, he married Antona Coates. One relative commented that Anna was the happiest person she had ever met. They had no children to carry the name Johannes H. Another son, Leonard, was born the 6th of June of 1856, but only lived 2 years and 10 months. 5 months after his death, another boy was born on April 21 of 1859, and as they so often did, named him Leonard also. He married Nellie Ernest, Grandma Susan's sister, but Nellie died the following year. He learned the blacksmith trade in Orange City, and in 1882 he moved to Harrison, Dakota Territory. He was in the implement business, and later with Mr. Viss in merchandise, was postmaster, and also had a boot and shoe business in Harrison. The 7th child was our grandfather Jacob, who was born on April 11 of 1860. That was the anniversary date. His father departed from Holland on April 11th, a special day, as twin grandchildren Bruce and Betty were born to Will and Catherine Markus. Also on that date, Dean and Marlene's grandson Trent was born to Roger and Denise Plooster. To complete the family, 2 more daughters were born to Johannes and Adriana. Jenny on December 24 of 1861. She had a millinery shop in Orange City, Iowa. She married at age 64 to John Ellenbrook. While both were in the old people's home, she lived to be 95. The youngest daughter, Adriana, was born in 1864 and grew up and married Sam Mullenberg. 9 children were born to them. In September of 1872, the Markus family loaded the wagon and 7 children, ages 7 to 22, and trekked across the prairie to join others from Pella who had established the town of Orange City. Grandpa Jacob would have been 12 years old. How I wish they had kept the journal of that trip. But that will have to be left to our imagination. Great-grandfather Johannes Markus received a patent for the land on 11th of September of 1873 for 160 acres, 4 miles south of Orange City, Iowa. Here is a copy of that document, signed Ulysses S. Grant by Secretary J.D. Williamson. On the 6th of April, 1887, Johannes Markus moved into Orange City, where he had built himself a new home at 604 Central Avenue. On June 15 of that year, he married Alchie Jellenhuis. The following article were taken from the Sioux County Herald. On June 15 of 1887, yesterday, J.H. Markus and Mrs. Alchie Jellenhuis, both of Orange City, were made one by the holy bonds of wedlock. The groom is 65 and the bride 59 years old. This is not the first marriage for either of them, this being the 2nd time for the groom and the 3rd for the bride. Neither seem to believe in single blessedness. The Herald wishes them much joy and a long and pleasant journey through the remainder of life. Copied from microfilm of June 16, 1887, issue of the Sioux County Herald by Elizabeth Vanderschaff. We understand that Mrs. J.H. Markus has left her husband's house and home. The parties were married for some 3 months and have 2 or 3 sets of children. The trouble arose over helping one of those who is in Dakota, probably Leonard, as he bought an implement business in Harrison, South Dakota that year. J.A. Markus died very suddenly and unexpectedly at his home in the south part of town. December 18, 1887, on a Sunday evening. He had been very slightly indisposed for a few days previous, but his family had not the remotest thought that it was anything more serious than a touch of rheumatism or a bad cold. He was about town on Saturday, and on Sunday ate his dinner as usual. In the evening his son attended church, leaving the oldest gentleman and his daughter alone. About 8 o'clock he felt so bad that he requested his daughter to get someone to go for a doctor. She crossed the street to Tony Kuiper's and started him for a physician. Others of the neighborhood came in and immediately and only arrived in time to find the old gentleman struggling through the closed scene of life's last drama. He died sitting in his chair by the stove. presumably of heart disease. Thus, he has passed from the stage of action another of Sioux County's pioneers. A successful farmer, a good citizen, one of the early settlers of the Holland colony at Pella. He came to Sioux County 18 years in 1869 and settled on his farm 4 miles south of town, where he resided until last spring, when he made for himself a handsome and comfortable home in the south addition and moved to town. His first wife died some years ago, and after his removal to town, he again took to himself a partner in the person of Mrs. Geldenhuis of this place. This union, however, was not productive of the harmony and pleasure anticipated, and after 2 or 3 weeks the lady returned to her own house. It is possible that the weary and troublesome incident to this unfortunate alliance hastened the old man's demise. Mr. Markus was 67 years of age and leaves behind a family of 7 grown children, an unmarried son and daughter. Jenny reside at home. 2 married daughters live in their neighborhood. Jacob and Leonard, 2 sons, and a Mrs. Beston, daughter, all married, live in Dakota. The funeral will take place at the family residence at 9:30 at the First Reformed Church, at 10:30 o'clock Friday morning.
Now we'll look back at some of the history of the Ernestine side of the family. According to second cousin Fred Ernestine, son of Ari, the name was originally Nissi. The EER in front of the name meant honorable. There's a town of Nissi in Holland and a river Nissi in France, and in Fred's writing he says the Ernestines and the Cliquenois were French Huguenots. They were chased all over France and lived for a time in the French Alps until they finally escaped to Holland. In the book Netherlanders in America by Henry S. Lucas, he says, quote, in 1843, 3 brothers of the Ernestine family came from Kadzan, Netherlands, and settled in Rochester, New York, a place where immigrants readily found work. In the following year, Janus Ernestine, the 4th brother, accompanied by his parents, crossed the Atlantic in a small sailing ship that carried 20 people. After 14 months' voyage, which they were chased by Portuguese pirates and narrowly escaped capture, they arrived in 1845, and the family were reunited in the city of Rochester, New York, unquote. Great-grandpa Janus would have been 15 years old when they started this voyage. What an adventure, if only he had written down all the details of that trip. His parents, Peter Jacobus Ernestine, and wife, Susanna Cliquenoy, were on the sailing vessel, so no doubt the younger children, Samuel, 13, Matthew, 11, and Susanna, 10 years old, were among those 20 passengers. The parents and 11 of their 12 children came to the Sheboygan, Wisconsin area, along with many other pioneers in 1847. The great-great-great-grandparents, Peter and Susanna, lived to be 89 and 91, respectively. Some of the Cliquenoy family also came to America, but they stayed in the Rochester, New York area. The leader of the Zealanders who settled in the Sheboygan area was great-great-grandfather Reverend Peter Zoney, with his wife Adriana and 6 children. He was the last of the seceders to be jailed for preaching the gospel in Holland. Zoney joined the seceders in 1840 and served as elder of the congregation at Delft. In 1842, he was the pastor of the seceders at Grenegren, but later established himself as kind of an exhorter at Newmansdorp. At the beginning of 1846, he was involved in illegal religious meetings in Abcoude and Bombrug in the province of Utrecht. These meetings marked the last determined effort of the government to punish the seceders. In May 1847, Zoney and family left for America and ultimately arrived in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where he preached to Hollanders. In 1847, when many Hollanders were settling Sheboygan County, he moved there to minister. There is much to be found about him in historic writings. He was very well liked and a very strong, charismatic leader. He established the town of Cedar Grove in Wisconsin, and the people first called it Zoneyville. Reverend Zoney drew the wrath of some when he changed to Presbyterian, and he held political rallies on Sunday afternoon, and he sold whiskey in his general store to please the Indian traders. Many of his congregation left, and evidently the Ernestys were among them. When John Ernest asked Reverend Zoney for his daughter Cornelia's hand in marriage, Reverend Zoney said no. According to Fred's writings, the young couple then eloped and were married in Milwaukee on the 5th of August of 1850. This is a sampler that Cornelia Zoney made when she was 16 years old in 1846. Each of the squares here were cut out and woven into a different design on each square. She also wove the border design. These center initials here were probably the school that she attended to learn these stitches. Notice the K in Cornelia Zoney, KZ. It seems like they interchanged K and C a lot in those days, and in records a lot of times it was written both ways in the same document. Great-great-grandparents John and Cornelia Zoney had 18 children, but only 4 survived infancy. The first to live was Peter in 1852. He grew up and married Adeline Notabum. He attended Hope College, taught school in Douglas County, was in insurance, was in partnership in the general store in Harrison with Leonard Markus. He was county auditor, county treasurer, and a staunch Republican. Peter and Adeline had 8 children. When Peter was 9 years old, his brother Ari was born on the 26th of January in 1861 in Wisconsin. And when he was 2 months old, Abraham Lincoln called for the 75,000 men for the War of the Rebellion, and his grandfather John Ernest was among the volunteers. The Dutch immigrants understood oppression and were quick to oppose. Here's a picture of the Ernestys in the Civil War. Great-Grandpa John, Brother Abraham, Samuel, and Matthew. And the other one on there is Peter Dana and the 2 cousins. Sister Susanna's husband, Peter Dana was Sister Susanna's husband. These 2, Abraham and John, then were cousins. Another brother, Peter, was not in the photo. This brother, Jacob, died in Helena, Arkansas, of typhoid. A daughter, Cornelia or Nellie, was born in 1864, and 2 years later, on June the 6th, 1866, Grandma Susan was born. And here's a tintype picture of Grandma Susan and her sister, Cornelia. When Susan was 8 years old, they moved to Orange City, Iowa, and the Markus family had arrived 2 years earlier in Orange City in 1872. In 1881, the little Ernestey family made the long trek back to Wisconsin. Grandpa John's parents had both died in the 2 preceding years, and while visiting there, great-grandmother Cornelia died. The following year, John sold his Orange City property and headed for Dakota Territory to join his son Peter and family and other pioneers, including the Markus family. Daughter Cornelia had married Leonard Markus, but died within the year. She's buried in Orange City. On November 1st, 1883, young Susanna, 17 and a half years old, married Jacob Markus, who was 23. It was the first marriage in the Harrison colony. 2 weeks later, Suzanne's husband, great-grandpa John, married Anna Tott. Son Ari married Sarah Bill, and around that time John and Anna had a baby named Anna, and once again, for the 15th time, Great-Grandpa John followed a tiny casket bearing one of his babies to the cemetery. Daughter Susan and Jacob Markus also had children, but we'll look into that at our grandparents' family a bit later. Back to Great-Grandpa John and Anna. A son, John Jr., was born on May the 25th of 1886, and 3 years later, little Gussie was born on the 2nd of April, 1889. She was the same age as our Aunt Nellie Sperry. When John Jr. was 9 years old and Gussie was 7, their mother, Anna, died. Gussie and Bessie, aunt and niece, were the same age. A clip in the paper of 1897 says, "Little Bessie and Gussie Ernestine ran away from home Monday and walked to town 5 miles," and that would have been to Harrison. Meanwhile, Great-Grandpa John once again married Mrs. Dinah Cadle, but in 1903 she died. John Jr. was 17 and Gussie was 14. On the 15th of September 1909, Great-Grandpa John Ernestine died. A week later, John Jr. married Mattie Doughty, and they owned and operated a hardware store in Corsica. John was also Register of Deeds until his death in 1941 on Christmas Day. Gussie married Otto Martin and later moved to Washington. She died January the 9th, 1965.
Jacob and Susie were married on November 1, 1883. This is the original marriage certificate. It states that the wedding took place at the residence of Leonard Markus, a brother of Jacob. With the information that we have available, this residence is still standing in the village of Harrison, across the street to the south of the First Reformed Church. It has not been lived in for a few years. Here is an early picture of that house. We do not know where Jacob lived when he settled in Dakota Territory, nor do we know where Jacob settled right after he was married, although we have seen a homestead paper for a different quarter of land that he purchased that listed his residence as Grand View. He bought a quarter of land from the government on November 16, 1883 for $1.25 an acre, or $200 for the quarter, and sold it just 1 month later for $700 for a whooping profit of $500 in just 1 month. This quarter is located 1 mile south and 5.5 miles west of the Markus homestead. We presume he began farming the homestead in the spring of 1884 because the acres planted and the yields in 1884 were recorded in this little book. It also states, "Settled on my claim November 15, 1884. The acreages and yields for the years 1885 to 1891 were also recorded." At the other end of this book are recorded the children born to them. John, or Johannes Hendrikus, as it is written in the book, was born June 2, 1884. Edward Janus was next, born October 14, 1885. Jacob Leonard, born September 28, 1887. Cornelia Nellie, born August 8, 1889. William Daniel, born March 23, 1892. Clarence Henry, born September 12, 1894. Richard Ernestine, born October 12, 1896. And Adriana Naomi, born April 4, 1899. All the Markus children attended the grade school just to the east of their house, which was always known as the Markus School. The school was built in 1891 and is still standing today on a farm about 5 miles from the Markus homestead. It is in surprisingly good shape, and the blackboards are still in the school. John Ernestine, Susie's father, had purchased a quarter of land located 2 1/2 miles east of the Markus homestead. In November of 1895, he sold this land to Jacob and Susie. After farming this land for just 1 year, they sold it back to John. Jacob and Susie and their family continued farming the homestead, and then in 1900 they bought 40 acres of land 2 miles west of the homestead from Rietzke and Tracy Walbrink. Today this land is hayland. In 1906, Ed, with some help from his brothers, built this house on the farm for his parents. In 1909, they bought 40 acres of school land adjoining the homestead to the south. He was awarded the patent for these acres in 1918. In 1917, the year before, he bought another 40 acres of school land to the west of the first 40 acres. He received the patent for these 40 acres in January of 1920. These acres constitute the Markus homestead to this day. By this time, John had married Jenny Mabel Sperry on January 1, 1907, and Nellie had married Charles Sperry on February 22, 1909. And Jacob Jr. married another Sperry, Louetta, on June 6, 1912. Louetta died on June 24, 1915. On October 26, 1918, Susie passed away in Rochester, Minnesota, having suffered from thyroid ailments for a number of years. Here's a copy of the letter that was sent by Jacob to Mr. and Mrs. Sam Mullenberg, who was Jacob's sister, telling of his wife's death, sent from Rochester, Minnesota, to Mr. and Mrs. S. Mullenberg and family. Dear brother and sister, my wife died last night here in the hospital. I leave for home this evening. I expect the funeral to be next Thursday or Friday. Wait for boys in camp. The farthest from California, from your brother, Jacob Markus. Here is the obituary of Susie Ernestine Markus. Jacob Sr. continued living on the farm with Clarence, Richard, and Naomi. When Naomi got married to Melvin Iverson on January 4, 1920, Jacob Sr. was concerned about not having a woman around the house. Clarence and Bertha Versteeg were dating, but were not contemplating marriage until the summer. They moved the wedding date up to February 1, 1920, so there was again a woman in the house. Jacob Sr. and Richard continued to live with Clarence and Bertha for a short while. Then Jacob Sr. moved to Orange City, Iowa, and lived with his sister Jenny. He remained a resident of Orange City from this time until 1935. On August 24, 1922, Jacob Jr. married Jenny Dorn. William married Catherine Copel on January 20, 1927. In 1925, he had his will made out, leaving his estate to his 8 children, and appointed Edward Markus as his executor. Here is a copy of the will. His residence in 1925 was listed as Orange City, Iowa. On April 27, 1927, Jacob married Anna Meiskens Beckman in Orange City. On October 7, 1928, Jacob Sr. was appointed treasurer of a Bible class at his church. Anna died July 6, 1933. On November 13, 1934, he made out warranty deeds for the land, giving the land to the 8 children for $1, love and affection. These warranty deeds were not filed in Douglas County, South Dakota until December 23, 1935, after Jacob had left Orange City and moved back to South Dakota. In the summer of 1935, because of failing health, he returned to South Dakota and stayed at some of the children's homes for a very short period of time. He then moved to Platt and stayed with his daughter, Nellie Sperry. His other daughter, Naomi Iverson, also lived in Platt at that time and could help care for him. He remained in Platt for about 1 year. In August or September of 1936, Jacob's health had deteriorated to a point where Nellie and Naomi could no longer care for him, and he had to be hospitalized at Yankton, South Dakota. Jacob Sr. passed away on September 25, 1937.
In the fall of 1935, when Nellie began caring for Jacob Sr., Ed Markus took care of the bookkeeping for him and the 8-way partnership of the land. Ed and Catherine rented the land from the partnership. Ed kept track of the transactions in these 2 books. The records in these 2 books document many of the dates and transactions done during those years. Meanwhile, back at the farm, Clarence and Bertha, along with Richard, farmed in 1920 and 1921. In 1922, Clarence and Bertha moved to another farm. Richard then farmed alone in 1922. Richard married Ada Buchelman, January 18, 1923, and they and their 2 sons continued farming this land until the end of 1936, when they bought the grocery store in Harrison. Ed married Catherine Ehlers on November the 25th, 1936, and moved to the farm on December 18, 1936. On December 3, 1945, a family meeting was held with all the families represented except for Will and Catherine Markus from Idaho. This is the contents of a letter apparently written to Will and Catherine telling them of the land sale, dated December the 3rd, 1945. Meeting when we all gathered except you. I was appointed agent for Pa to do his business for him before he died, and in his will I was appointed administrator. I was appointed agent for to look after the interest of the land. I withdrew my offer on the place, so there was a free chance for all. John suggested to use my price as a appraised price. Naomi suggested that anyone who wanted to give more than the appraised price had a chance to do so. No reply to that. Jacob made a motion to sell it to me. All supported the motion, so I bought the place at the appraised price. This letter was in Ed's handwriting. The appraised price was $7,700. Ed and Catherine and their 2 sons farmed this land until 1971, at which time their son Delmer took over the farming operation. Delmer and his wife Beth continued renting the land from Ed and Catherine until 1984, when Delmer and Beth purchased the farm from Ed and Catherine. Ed and Catherine lived in a new house on the farm which Ed and Delmer built in 1968, and Delmer and Beth and family lived across the yard in the old house. There are not many farms in this area that have been homesteaded and remained in the same family for over 100 years. The Markus farm is one of them. This gives us the distinction of being a South Dakota century farm. There are many memories that each of us has of the Markus family members. Older ones will remember Jacob and Susie. The younger ones may not remember any of the 8 children, as the first of the children to pass away was Jacob Jr. in 1947, and the last to pass away was Ed in 1984. Some of the memories indicate that Jacob Sr. dressed well and seemed quite intelligent. An invention which he had patented in 1921 is here. The patent and the folder it came in are also here. The jig used to construct these instruments, sorry to say, has been torn apart or lost over the years. This instrument is labeled as a pig forceps. It was invented to help farrowing sows with difficulty in delivering baby pigs. Not many of these instruments were made or marketed. He also was not a man to be pushed around by the government. As the story goes, the original survey of the land in this area was done somewhat shoddily. Measuring was done with a rag tied to a wagon wheel, and the revolutions were counted to get a measurement. After August the 16th, 1910, when the area was resurveyed, the new road east and west by the Markus farm would have come between the house and the barn. Jacob would not sign an easement, so the road was curved around the farmstead. The north and south road was moved to the west a few hundred feet, so that did not present a problem. Later in the 1920s, when a drainage ditch was constructed on the Markus farm, the plan was to come through the farm from east to west at an angle to the northwest. Permission was granted only if the ditch was straight with right angle bends, so the fields would be square. This has proved to be a wise move, as the operators on the Markus farm over the years can tell you, because there are no crooked fields or point rows, especially with the larger equipment of today to contend with. This has been a brief history. There is much we left out because of time. We're so thankful for the Christian heritage they have given us. We pray that none of us will forget it.
How old are you, Markus?
I was 91.
Ah, we have one older. Aunt Bertha was 90 last September. I recognize him. David James Markus. His birthday, first birthday will be celebrated June 26th, the Lord willing. That day was used as this. Last day was the oldest first. All the members of the John Markus line would gather up themselves in appropriate order and say,
wait a minute now, let me get on. You can't get any of you people over there, because the front row has to move down this way. The back row has to move over. I don't know if you guys can see.
This is a good place to sit.
You get them all?
It's okay to move this, Evan? Is there somebody here that's got the history, going to present the history?
Now we're looking for the spokesperson. I think enough pictures have been taken.
Can I take another one? Got to be short, doing. Got to take short.
Which of you was designated as a spokesperson? Spokesperson, to give a little history of the family.
Can you hear me? Okay. Lawrence Markus is really supposed to be doing that. But these big brothers always treat their sisters, you know how. So I have to do it. So I'm glad to talk about my father, John Markus. He was born here in this Harrison area to Susie and Jacob Markus on June 2nd, 1884, and here in Douglas County. And he grew up here and married Mabel Sperry in 1907. Then they moved to Todd County, where he bought land. They lived there where Lowell was born. So they had the 4 children. They lived on this farm until he retired and turned it over to Lawrence and Willard. And they bought a house in Lakeview. And that's where his wife, Mabel, passed away. I should out here. He spent the rest of his life in Valentine, running the muddy wooden shoe court. And he visited quite often in the Montrose, Colorado, with his youngest son, Lowell Markus, and that is where he passed away. And he is buried in the Lakeview Cemetery. And that was June 18, 1964, that he passed away. Thank you.
Thank you kindly, Mother, for that report.
Didn't have a sister to push this off on, so I suppose I better do it. Ed Markus was the second child of Jacob and Susie Markus. After attending the Markus School for the first 8 grades, he also attended Fremont Normal School in Fremont, Nebraska, taking accounting courses. In 1905, he, with the help of his brothers, built his first house. The house was for his parents on the Markus farmstead. From 1908 to 1913, he proved up a homestead in Stanley County, later called Hacken County. He later moved back to the Harrison area and built many houses, schoolhouses, and other buildings in the area. He was also employed by the Corsica Lumber Company. He also lived in Todd County and built the buildings on his farm there. He lived there with Lawrence Markus and the Will Markus family for a time in the late 20s or the early 30s. We believe he came back to the Harrison area in the late 1933 or early 1934, as he farmed in Aurora County from 1934 through 1936. In November of 1936, he married Catherine Ehlers. Shortly thereafter, they moved to the Markus homestead with Richard and Ada Markus had been farming. In May of 1940, a son Lloyd was born, and that's me. In October 1942, another son, Delmer, was born, and he's sitting beside his mother. They continued farming until Ed's retirement in 1971, but they continued living on the farm. In 1968, at the age of 83, Ed built his last house, the house where he lived in the remainder of his life. He died in November of 1984 at the age of 99 years. Catherine is now a resident of the Pleasant View Good Samaritan Center in Corsica. I'll read Delmer's first. It's short. Mine's a little bit longer. Delmer also grew up on the Markus homestead and attended the Markus School, Corsica High School, and Northwestern College. In June of 1974, he married Elizabeth Bima. They have 3 children, Tamara, a junior in high school, Eric, an 8th grader, and Melanie, a 4th grader, and they are presently farming the Markus homestead. Okay, I was born in 1940, attended grade school at Markus School, Corsica High School, and married Dolores DeBoer in 1962. I worked for Old Home for about 20 years, and now I work for herd alignment. We have 4 children. Dwight is our oldest, and he is here today. He graduated from University of South Dakota. Well, first he went to grade school and high school in Huron, and then graduated from the University of South Dakota with Bachelor of Fine Arts, emphasis in acting and playwriting. 87, Dwight eloped with Diana Hahn and was married. 1989, Dwight's first produced play was performed at the Sioux Falls Community Playhouse. In 1992, Dwight graduated from USD with a double master's degree. Diana, his wife, graduated with a Bachelor of Fine Arts in Theatrical Scenic Design. And in August, they will be moving to Austin, Texas, where Diana has been accepted in their graduate design program. Todd was our second son, born in 1966. Went to Huron grade school and high school, and then he went to Southeast Votech in Sioux Falls for auto body, and now he works for Simon Telelect in Huron. Jody, our oldest daughter, Jody Lynn, was born in 1967. Married Lee Christensen in 1986, and we have one granddaughter, Erin Lee, born in 1988. She is now attending Southeast Votech in Sioux Falls and studying to be a vascular cardiopulmonary technician. And our youngest, Christy Kay, was born in 1975, and she's a senior in high school. Thank you.
How about getting in behind maybe? Behind your wife?